All right, so 75, let me repeat that, 75% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. That's 6 in 10 adults have at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 have multiple chronic diseases. So if you ever asked yourself, why was America, why did it have the most COVID death? It's because of this. So many people already had multiple chronic diseases, and it didn't take much for a virus to come along and knock them out. And 70% of all deaths in America is caused because of chronic diseases. All right, so who is to blame, for all this? Well, let's look at the chemicals in our food here in America. We have additives, preservatives, which that's an old saying. The longer the shelf life of a product, the shorter is yours. And it is absolutely true. And then also we have artificial sweetener. Artificial sweeteners are linked to microbiome disruption. It messes up your microbiome, and and we already know that the microbiome is super important. You cannot have an unhealthy gut and a healthy brain. That's impossible. In Chinese medicine, we have seen the brain and the gut as one organ. Those I call them the pets, the microbes that live in your gut. We have like about 3 pounds, trillions of them living in there. They directly communicate with the brain. And that is not an analogy, right? They literally, through the spinal cord, directly talk to your brain. And they can influence, your emotions, the way you feel, and even decision making. And then colorants, the color is important when it comes to, buying food, especially when it comes to, processed food. They're all bright colors, which attracts. Here in America, we use red 40, yellow 20, and all those stuff, right, to make it really bright. I'm not sure if you guys have been following, with Casey Means and Kennedy. They're actually exposing all this stuff now, which is, I was waiting for this moment for so long, because the same company, Kellogg's as an example, they're under big pressure right now. Kellogg's uses the same products they sell in Canada and in Europe. The only difference here in America, we use all those freaking, chemicals, colors, and over there they use sweet potato for coloring, carrot juice, beet juice, and so on. And America is now asking to get the same treatment. And then we have emulsifiers, which is a group of chemicals that is important, to bind products. As an example, if it's a product that is, let's say, water-based or oil-based, water and oil doesn't mix well. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. We got chemicals. It makes it perfectly. And it is interesting. Herbicides. I wrote this one down in particular. Herbicide called estrogen. Estrogen is widely used in Europe, but a lot here in America. So they did some testing to see if that pesticides, herbicides, insecticides have an impact on hormone production. What happens? So they took frogs and they exposed the frogs to the herbicide, estrogen. And it castrated male frogs, and in some cases, it turned a male frog to a female frog. And you can look up the study here when you Google it. That was mind-blowing. So I think it's safe to say, what do you think is going to happen to us humans when we consume all those chemicals and we get exposed to this year after year? Could that be an answer, why, transgenderism is on the rise? I'm sure it's one of, many reasons. If that can happen to animals, then eventually, it can also happen to us. And then some stats. So here in America, we have way over 10,000 chemicals, pesticides, and they're all deemed to be safe by our regulatory agencies. To put that in perspective, in Europe, we have less than 400 chemicals that are allowed. And what is the difference? How come in America we have so many? Well, here in America, we have something that's called a single dose toxicity. As an example, if you get exposed to a single dose of whatever, some toxin, and you don't show any side effects or like allergic reaction to it, then it's deemed to be safe and we can use it for our food supply. In Europe, we have accumulative toxicity. So you might not show any reaction on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, but after 10 days getting exposed to the same chemical, all of a sudden you show a reaction. So it's considered then toxin and it's not allowed in the food supply. And that's why in America we have so many chemicals and in Europe only 400. And 90% of our crops in America are genetically modified. They're known as GMO, corn, soybeans, canola, cotton, sugar beets, alfalfa, potatoes, apples, and so on. And you might say, yeah, but in America they said that GMO is fine, there's no side effects. All right, then why is it illegal in Europe, and in Russia you go to jail for 20 years? So there must be something, right? And here's why. They did a study in the United States with genetically modified crops and fed them to the rats. The study only went on for 3 months. After 3 months, there were no real side effects, no tumor growing, nothing. However, the same study has been conducted in France. That study went on for 2 years. And after 9 months and 12 months, all their rats had tumors growing the size of tennis balls. That's why it's illegal all over in Europe, but it's fine here. And some of the chemicals, we use daily, the MSG, I would say 80% of the restaurants use MSG. It's like an enhancer. It makes taste everything better. Especially if you go to Vegas and buffet, they have tons of it on it. And then artificial coloring, like we talk about it, just think about, in the animal kingdom, the bees, right? They get attracted by the bright colors of the flower. Us humans, we're the same, red, yellow. That's why McDonald's has yellow and red, because studies have shown it attracts and reminds you to eat. So all the coloring is not just random colors. There's actually a lot of studies behind it. And then high fructose corn syrup. All right, so here I have something to say about sugar. In my opinion, sugar is not for human consumption, period. And here's why. Thousands of years ago, we never had sugar. The only sugar that we were exposed to was, through fruits and stuff like that. But we never were exposed to like high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is sugar on steroids. We already have a hard time, processing regular sugar. So what do you think is going to happen with sugar on steroids? And on top of that, high fructose corn syrup is made out of GMO corn. So you also get, genetically modified on top of that. But it's very cheap and it's very effective. And let me show you what happens when you consume sugar. Let's say this is your blood glucose. When it comes to health and longevity, blood glucose is all about, low to medium. This is considered healthy and also like for longevity. However, every time you eat something, I don't know, ice cream, chocolate, anything that raises your blood glucose, it shoots up. Everything that shoots up eventually has to come down. And when it comes down below base level. And that's when you have cravings. That's when you feel dizzy. That's when you have your lips getting all like numb and everything. And if you have that, congratulations, you actually have food addiction. You're addicted to sugar. And speaking of sugar, did you know that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine? There was another famous study with rats. They had 20 rats locked up in a cage with sugar water and 20 rats locked up with cocaine water. They left them in there for a few days, and then they combined them and offered both options. And guess what happened? Only 2 rats went for the cocaine water. So that should tell you something. All right, and then we have potato chips, also full of chemicals and processed food, but they have trans fat. Trans fat, we took off the market because it caused so many major heart disease and heart issues. However, it's still, if you look at the package, right, the fat and the trans fat, they are, depending on the product, but the amount is based on like 6 or 5 chips. But let's face it, there's no way when you start eating chips, you only eat like 5 or 6. You kill the entire bag. And then you will have an overload of trans fat. And then oils. When it comes to oils, there's some really healthy ones and then some really bad ones. The healthy ones are coconut oil, which you can use for cooking, which is saturated fat. Every oil that's solid in room temperature, that's oil you can cook with. Liquid oils you cannot cook with. You can, but you destroying the structure and it becomes rancid. And then olive oil, and then the most important one is fish oil. Omega-3 fatty acids is the most important one. Even our brain, is made out of that too. And then avocado is like so, depending on the company and how they process it. But those are the healthy ones, and also flaxseed oil. However, the vegetable oils, if you just Google, how they process vegetable oils, especially canola and stuff like that, they have omega-6 fatty acids. And if you get exposed to too much of the omega-6 fatty acids, you can cause inflammation, and inflammation is the first stepping stone to chronic disease and many other issues. and it also speeds up the aging process.